From Fox News, Trump and Hegseth seethe at fake news media for doubting U.S. strikes obliterated Iranian nuclear site. Trump says scum. Now, you've never seen Trump so angry. This is fascinating. Earlier this morning, we heard from Hegseth and Dan Kane. The strikes on Iran, they report, obliterated the sites. Hegseth said, if you want to figure out what's going on at Fordo, bring a shovel. It's all buried and no one's getting in. They showed evidence and said, based on the IAEA, Israel and United States assessment, it looks like the strikes succeeded. Now, of course, let me say this first and foremost. You guys know I'm a staunch anti-interventionist. I am not a fan of the U.S. getting involved in these strikes. But just like Soleimani, if Trump is able to engage in his military activity without causing a war, then it's largely vanilla pudding. I'm not happy with it, but it's not all that bad. The fear we have is getting drawn out into entrenched, ongoing multi-decades wars. And if Trump can avoid that, it is better than any other president in my life. So, vanilla, right? It is what it is. But here's what happens. CNN puts out this leaked report, which apparently was only one page, and omitted that it was an initial low confidence assessment. Meaning after the strikes, they said, we don't actually know. From the look of things, it might not be that much damage. We'll have to wait and see. CNN leaks it selectively. The media then runs all around saying it didn't work. And then when you actually get the Pentagon involved, Hegseth, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as other nations, you don't got to like Israel, but Israel, who wants us bombing it, said actually they did it. Now, of all people, this is funny, of all nations, Israel has all the reason to say we failed because they want more war with Iran. But instead, their assessment was they've been set back years and it would take years to reconstruct this. The media is lying. They, for whatever reason, it's just they plain hate Donald Trump. Trump slams the press for reporting on government's own intel report, Jake Tapper says. Well, my friends, the media is smarmy. They're full of it, and they lie. And they do it because they need to have something other than what Trump said. Now, to talk about this and the potential for real peace, we're going to be joined by Congressman Stutzman, who's going to be joining us right now as I pull all of this up. And I believe he has a lot to discuss on, where's this silly link? He has a lot to discuss on the Abraham Accords, as well as the Powell meeting, which should be insightful and interesting. So we are loading this up right now. Looks like we are good. Congressman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Thank you for joining me. I think we got it going right now. So the big story this morning, of course, was Pete Hegseth addressing the leaked intel report, which said that there was the full report of which I understand was low confidence. We are not sure we did enough damage or this is going to set them back more than a few months. But now the full assessment from other nations, other organizations like the IAEA, as well as the full U.S. assessment is that this set them back years. There's a couple questions in regard to this. How is this information getting leaked? Because it seems like the insinuation is that it may have been leaked by Congress or somebody who was briefed on this. And then just generally, why do you think the media ran with this story without full context?
Yeah, well, Tim, great to be with you. I mean, you know, Washington, D.C. is full of sneaks, and especially with the ones that would like to do any sort of damage that they can to President Trump. And, you know, the success that he is having, they just can't admit it. The fact that, you know, it's not just Trump's success. It's the United States' success. It's the world is a safer place today because we took out Iran's nuclear capabilities. And that's something that they just can't admit to. And, you know, it sounds like a reporter that perpetuated this story was the same reporter from CNN that pushed the, Hunter Biden story that, his laptop had nothing to do. There was the disinformation that went along with that whole story came from CNN. So, that's the thing about, the sad state of affairs with the fake news is that they just cannot report the news objectively. And even if they want to be, one-sided or the other, when good things happen for America and happen for the world, report it as such because we're a better we're in a better situation today because Iran's nuclear capability is destroyed. You know what? I totally understand kind of, the aftermath, how much damage was done. Did the bombs do their job? Look at it. But everybody, even the international agencies that look at this stuff consistently are saying that, yeah, the damage was done to the nuclear sites, and that it's going to be very hard for Iran to start up their nuclear capabilities again at these particular sites. But this is just, fake news is normal, and that's why the American people are tuning them out.
It's surprising to me too as well, because I'm fairly opposed to U.S. intervention, even just the airstrikes. However, Trump seems to have navigated out of this with an end to the conflict altogether, which even has many of the staunch anti-interventionist personalities kind of shrugging, saying he did it. He was able to get off a military strike without expanding any war in the region. And that's what everybody really feared. What I was really excited about with Trump's first term, of course, was the Abraham Accords, as well as no new wars, which is why I was deeply concerned over these strikes in Iran. But now it seems like this actually might pave the way for more peace in the region, of which many have said Iran is the principal agitator stopping the Abraham Accords. I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about what's going on in that regard and if we're going to see more peace and economic normalization.
Yeah, no, well, and I would just mention this real quickly as well, because Israel, of course, is there on the front lines next to Iran, and so all of the intel was pointing to the fact that Iran did have nuclear capability. They were very close to a bomb, and if they had enriched uranium and they were able to put the bombs together, they could produce almost 9 bombs.
Wow.
And Israel would have been the one that would have had to deal with it first, because there's no secret that Iran wants to annihilate and eliminate Israel. And then, of course, it's death to Israel and it's death to America. Well, what Trump did is he used the sledgehammer. He didn't just come in with a hammer. He used the sledgehammer and just took the threat out and warned them. He even negotiated with them. He gave them numerous chances to say, look, put down your nuclear program, and we can find peace. And I think that one of the biggest moments in all of this that all of us should really remember, outside of President Trump being willing to drop the bunker busters and take out the threat, is when he pulls Iran and Israel leadership together and gets the ceasefire. Well, the ceasefire didn't sound like it was going to hold long. And who does he call first when it looked like both sides were going to continue shooting at each other? He calls Prime Minister Netanyahu and says, turn the planes around. I just think that's a very historic moment. And Prime Minister Netanyahu's respect for President Trump is so great that he turns the planes around, brings them back home, because in that moment, it would have been easy to kind of say, we're going to go bomb them one more time. And President Trump says, no, stop, turn around, bring them home. No more of this stuff. And I think that's what a leader does. And he's saying, stop fighting. And we took care of the problem.
Netanyahu still got off one strike, though. And so, it's pretty middle of the road. Netanyahu wanted to go ahead with many more strikes. And when Trump said no, he attacked one radar facility. I view that as somewhat petty. It felt to me like, Trump pointed out Iran fired off one missile. Maybe it was a mistake. No, I think Iran was like, we get the last word in this. And then Israel's like, no, we get the last word in this. Which is why Trump ultimately said the kids are going to fight in the playground. And then NATO chief somewhat regrettably called him daddy. I see a little bit of disrespect, but admittedly, turning around those planes, he knew he was in a position where he couldn't defy Trump to a great degree and still got off one of these strikes. But I guess the bigger question then is, the Abraham Accords, it's tremendous history. The economic normalization between Muslim nations and Israel. Are we going to see that peace expand to other countries in the region?
Yes, I believe so. In fact, I was in Syria over the Easter break a couple of months ago, and then just recently in Israel, and had a lot of great conversations. Met with the new president in Syria, President al-Shara, and of course, I met with Prime Minister Netanyahu and talked with other leaders. There's a real opportunity there. In fact, I'm excited. I think that we're just on the cusp of there being some, we've always talked about peace in the Middle East. There's always going to be differences. There's going to be skirmishes. But broadly, you look at where Saudi Arabia is compared to where they were a little over a decade ago. I was in Saudi Arabia in 2014, was talking with their leadership. And this was still, 9/11 was in our rearview mirror, and we're not going to forget that. And Saudi Arabia has changed and has done things differently than what they used to. The UAE, that's the model, actually, I believe, because a couple of things. They joined the Abraham Accords, and they don't teach hatred or killing Israeli or American soldiers in their curriculum in their elementary schools, unlike what they do in the Palestinian-controlled areas. And so I think those are the two pieces, Nate, that really need to be used to flush out these countries is, are you willing to join the Abraham Accords, and what type of curriculum are you teaching in your schools? So when I was meeting with President al-Shara, I was surprised how he, you always kind of watch their body language and how do they, what excites them, when do they kind of pull back? And I just sensed that from him, when he started talking about commerce and trade in the Middle East, that's when he kind of got excited, because he talked about trade lines through Syria, connecting the east to the west, talked about putting in rail lines, truck lines, and then also talked about tourism. And, the impact that tourism could have in Syria is incredible. I mean, Damascus is one of the holy cities for Christianity, and that could have a huge impact. If people could visit Jerusalem and then go to Damascus, that would be a huge opportunity for people from around the world to travel there. So I think that that's all part of bringing Syria to the table, and that President al-Shara, I felt like he genuinely wanted to go that direction. I asked him specifically and told him, the relationship with Israel is important to the United States. What's his vision of that relationship? And I asked him directly, would you be open to joining the Abraham Accords? And he said that he would. Wow. He said there was some negotiation that would have to take place. The one thing that was really important to him, and I think it's a good priority for him, is that he wants to keep Syria under a national flag, under a national banner as Syria. He doesn't want it to be a sectarian government. He doesn't want to have these divisions, the Kurds in the north and the Druze in the southeast, and you got the Muslims in other parts of the countries, the Christians, the Alawites, and his goal is that everybody live together as Syrians, respecting one another. And now he's got a big task, but I'm optimistic.
Why didn't we get this until Trump? I don't understand.
Well, a couple of things. I think that there is some reason to be rooting for Ukraine and for the Ukrainian military to be able to keep Putin engaged long enough that it's weakened Putin. So Putin couldn't run down to Syria and defend Assad. And Assad's always counted on Putin to bail him out. And that just ran out. And so when al-Shara and his military, his militia, finally came down from Idlib to the north and up by Turkey, they came down to Damascus. Not a single fire was shot. That's what's incredible, is that if you would have told all of us there would be a regime change in Syria without a battle or some sort of war, I don't think any of us would have believed it. But President al-Shara was able to orchestrate all this, come down to Damascus. Assad flees with his billions of dollars up to Russia, wherever he's at now, and al-Shara and his government takes over. So, al-Shara has a checkered past, but he's the one that he got the job done and pushed Assad out. And I'm optimistic, but I think it was some timing, but also I couldn't believe how much support and love in Syria there is for President Trump. There were billboards in the streets of Damascus saying, make Syria great again. There was a sentiment, that there was so much excitement that at that time that maybe the United States would lift the sanctions on Syria, and that would be a huge economic boom for Syria, which ultimately President Trump did make that decision. So I think it was timing, but it was also the leadership of President Trump that people know he's going to stand up and fight for them. He was the one that held off a bunch of the Russians and the Syrian military, Assad's military, to go into Idlib back in 2018 and wipe out thousands of civilians, all in the name of going after terrorists. And President Trump put a stop to that, and the civilians in Syria remember that.
It's pretty amazing to me. I'm deeply critical of Obama's foreign policy. I didn't support Trump in 2016, but when he came in and I saw the actions he had been taking towards peace, When he crossed the DMZ from South Korea to North Korea, shook hands with Kim Jong-un, the media attacked him for it. And now we take a look at the past several years. I know a lot of friends of mine are going to be very critical of U.S. involvement in Syria and Ukraine. Trump didn't start those. In fact, it seems like he's trying as hard as he can to clean it all up. Under his first term, the Abraham Accords, Joe Biden gets in. You can say whatever you want about how he did. I know a lot of people are pissed off. And then we get war again. Trump comes in, and now we're starting to see peace again, which is why the Iran strikes were worrisome. But it looks like Trump was able to get through that as well, ultimately resulting in a ceasefire and with a nuclear de-escalation. As much as those strikes give pause to those of us who are concerned about war, I got to say, Trump is the peace president. You know, certainly we can criticize some of the things because you're never going to get someone who's perfect. But this is some of the best foreign policy leadership, if not the best, period, I've seen in my lifetime.
Yes.
I'm curious your thoughts, though. In Congress, there's concern that he should be getting authorization before launching these strikes. I know there's the War Power Resolution of 1973. But ultimately, after so long, why did it take Donald Trump? I don't understand why the old Republican Party or the Democratic Party weren't doing the things that he's doing now.
Well, that's a great question. And I think part of it goes back to, even Senator Lindsey Graham posted, game on when there was an attack from Israel to Iran. And I think to him, that's means something very different than probably what you and I believe it is. This is not a game. I mean, this is not something like, hey, we're going to cheer for a war here. We shouldn't be cheering for war. We should actually be cheering for peace. And that's where I think the old, neocon school of thought is peace through strength. What President Trump has done is he's added something to that. It's peace through strength and prosperity. And that's where I believe people, if they have the opportunity to, and again, this isn't going to be everybody, but in general, most civilizations, if you look at the UAE, that's a good example of it. Look at Saudi Arabia. Look at these countries that were undeveloped, 50 years ago that have come a long ways because of oil and other opportunities that they have, shipping. When there's commerce, there's not chaos, like President Trump said. And when there's technology and there's a way to build, I think there's a part of all of us as human beings that we like to build. Now, if there's an enemy and people, they killed your father or they killed your family, there's always this back and forth, and it's got to stop. At some point, you got to say, put it behind you. I mean, you just got to forgive the sins of the past. If people can agree to that and start building, even if you don't have to be the best of friends, but you don't have to go attack one another. One of the things that I think was really interesting, I was talking with the president of Kosovo a couple of weeks ago, and she's a young 40-something president of Kosovo, and she said, and this goes all the way back to our U.S. policy under President Clinton, but it does kind of give us an idea, an example of what American policy can be and should be, is that Kosovo has been a war-torn country for years and years. And she told me, she's very Trumpy. She said that she wants to join the European Union in Kosovo, but she has to dial the Trump talk down a little bit because, of course, Europe is not where they used to be. Yeah. And nor, they're always looking to us to lead anyway, outside of Churchill, of course. But she said that because of the United States, her young children are the first generation of Kosovans in 1,000 years who have not seen war.
Wow.
And I think that's what shows all of us here in America, where we don't see war on our streets like other countries do. We have our issues, but we don't see what they see in Kosovo for thousands of years of just war and constantly. They're now experiencing peace, and people like it. I even sense that in Syria with folks, that they're so tired of war. They're so tired of fighting. They want to have peace. I went to a Christian church. They were telling me, we have no problem with our Muslim neighbors. They're not attacking us. We want to live together in just peace and respect for one another. That's what grown-ups do. We find a way. We can agree to disagree, but we don't have to shoot each other over it.
I'm excited to hear about the potential for the expansion of the Abraham Accords. Now, taking it back home, many people who are just upset over the whole scenario with war are saying, we need to get back to our domestic agenda, and Trump should be focused on the big, beautiful bill, migration. I'm curious your thoughts on the current state of Trump's, big, beautiful bill, as he's calling it,
Yeah.
and what you think we should be focusing on here at home.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, the big beautiful bill is really important to keep taxes from going up and grow this economy. One of the things, I come from the business world and come from family business, farm family, manufacturing, logistics. We were in the restaurant business, so our families covered a variety of sectors, and I know how hard it is, especially going through COVID. What government did to small businesses and businesses across the country was devastating to people. People lost their livelihoods because the government shut down the economy and then tried to pay them back some other way with, government with taxpayer money through the government, which wasn't the solution at all. But this big, beautiful bill is going to extend the Trump tax cuts from 2018, make them permanent. It's going to really focus on growth, and that's how we're going to get out of our debt and our deficits. I'm a budget hawk, and one thing that I believe the greatest threat to the United States is our debt and deficits. $36 trillion of debt. You throw interest on top of that. We're paying about $1 trillion a year in debt service on our debt. That's equal to our military, and we're spending more on our military than we ever have. But Washington just doesn't seem to have any appetite to cut spending, and that's where President Trump, Elon Musk, the Doge team did a huge service to not only the American people, but actually did a huge service to Congress. I was actually in a meeting yesterday with Speaker Mike Johnson, and he was saying the same thing that a lot of us have experienced. We're trying to find out, where is the money going? And when you write these agencies and ask, where's the money going? They tell you what they want you to hear. They don't tell you the truth. And what the Doge team has done and what the Trump administration has done is actually going right to the Treasury. $1 billion an hour is what leaves the Treasury. And that's a number that we can't even imagine. But if you think about it, $1 billion an hour, if somebody figured out a way to get into the Treasury to get payments for some sort of contract in the past, and the Treasury keeps making payments on it, do you think they call them up and say, hey, you don't have to send us that money anymore? Stuff like that happens. It's sloppiness, it's irresponsible, and I think that's what the Doge team and what the Trump team are doing to focus on getting spending under control. But we've got to grow this economy as well.
Yeah, there was one of the stories during the Doge arc, I'd call it, when Elon was in there, where it was like a single page demanding the Treasury pay like $1 billion, and they were like, what is this? And It was like an invoice for $1 billion, and nobody knew what it was. And they're like, let's just not pay it. And there's tons of those. It reminds me of, I've known people like this, I'm sure a lot do. Their parents or their grandparents were rich, and they're in college and got a credit card, and they're like, I don't know, shrug. Who wants expensive drinks? And they just spend money. They have no idea where it comes from. They have no idea how it was earned. And we effectively have that in government now. There is a concern. I think the big concern Rep. Massey as well as Senator Rand Paul have is that the big, beautiful bill still does add to the deficit, at least on the surface. There's an argument that if we actually deal with the issues of immigration and implement some of what's in the bill, our costs will go down in other areas. I'm curious if you think that's correct or how you view it.
It is. And Rand and Thomas are great friends of mine, and they're not wrong in the sense that, but here's the difference. And this is Washington's math. This is the way Washington looks at it. So they say if you cut taxes, it's less revenue to the government. So therefore, that's a cost. They call that even spending, which we've even fallen into that narrative and said, oh, if you cut taxes, you're spending money. Well, no, the government is losing that money. The government's not going to get that revenue from those taxes, but because of the way Congressional Budget Office scores our bills, the keeping the tax cuts in place, they're calling that like $1 trillion spend. Well, it's not. It's just foregoing that money. Here's an interesting, important fact as well. Because we have hovered around 2.5% GDP growth, even down, we're pushing down towards the 2% mark during the Obama years. For every percent GDP that we lose, that's $1 trillion in revenue. So because we have fallen away from the 3% GDP growth that we've been used to for so long as a country, that's where a lot of the revenue has been lost. Spending is still out of control. There's still spending to cut and reforms to be made. But that's why it's important to have a growing economy, so that way there is tax revenue. But at the same time, in the big beautiful bill, the only spending that's in there that is like cash going out from the Treasury is for defense and for the border. All of the others is basically just eliminating, keeping the tax cuts low, and then also the EV tax credits, those are going away. So they all count those as expenditures. And it's the different ideology between how the left looks at economics and how the right looks at economics.
I love me some tax cuts. I think it's a good direction.
I always leave money with the American taxpayer.
Absolutely. Well, we got a little bit of time, so I'm curious your thoughts. Obviously, the big story of the past couple of days outside of Iran was Zohran Mamdani's victory in New York City. He's an avowed socialist. And this is the younger generation that helped him win. I'm curious what you think is going to happen in the midterms, because the prediction made by many of these leftists is leftism defeats establishment democratic policy or campaigning. What do you think is going to happen in the midterms? Do you think we're going to see a big socialist push from new candidates, or do you think they just, what happens?
It's a great question, and one is scary, frankly, because you look at historically, the president's party loses. I think it's only happened twice where the president's party actually maintained the majority in the House. I was part of the first Tea Party wave back in 2010. Of course, that was President Obama's first midterm, and he loses badly because of Obamacare. But I'm optimistic. There's a lot of sense of optimism because the Democrat Party hasn't necessarily learned from their losses and why President Trump won. And I think that they've been doubling down on the policies that they were telling the American people are so great. I was chairing the floor earlier today, and I couldn't believe, again, how many Democrats were coming to the floor talking about defending illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
This is one that us as American people, we're like, you know what? Why don't you start defending the legal people that are here rather than defending the illegals that came over here illegally? And so I think that the Democrats continue to double down on these very unpopular positions. They have taught socialism to a lot of their children over time, and it's scary to think that that's where New York City's at. How many years ago was it that we had even Bloomberg was at least somewhat of a free market sort of a person with ideas, but since Rudy Giuliani, we've gone far, far left.
Yep.
And I think that's where our big cities, Nate, I really truly believe that New York, the state of New York, and the state of California, and the state of Illinois are the biggest hurt to the federal government because they continue to take and take. California's reimbursements just on Medicaid alone is about $160 billion a year. That's larger than the entire state budget of Florida. These states continue to take more and more and give to illegals, and I think it's going to come back to haunt them in the primary or in the next election.
That was the big thing with the SALT deductions. Basically, these blue states get it freebies. They pay less in federal taxes. They pay more to themselves.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
There is still some speculation that this Mamdani guy might lose because you'll get a moderate and Republican coalition against him. I'm not entirely sure, but I think the takeaway from it is the younger generation of left-leaning Americans are socialist or communist, and that's going to have an effect across the country. Now, with the issue of the midterms, I'm wondering if, you mentioned correctly, historically, the president's party loses the midterms. But, man, if they keep taking these 80-20 issues and going on the wrong side, like defending illegal immigrants, they might break the trend. So I suppose we'll see. If you have any quick final thoughts before we take off?
No, I think it's possible. And, and I'll say this one other thing. We talked about this a little earlier with the Middle East and the curriculum that's taught in the Middle East. It's the same fight that we have here at home. We need to make sure that our curriculum across the country and across the school districts in the United States is teaching curriculum that teaches American values rather than teaching socialism, that socialism is somehow a good form of government. AOC, if she becomes the face of the Democrat Party, I think they'll be in the wilderness for the next 40 years.
Right on. Well, Congressman, thank you so much for joining me. Is there somewhere people can find more from you?
Yeah, check us out on all of the social media platforms. At Rep Stutzman is our handle on all of those, at Rep Stutzman. Love for people to check us out, engage, and you know what? We got to keep fighting to make America great again.
Right on. Well, thanks so much for hanging out. We'll see you next time.
Great to see you. Thanks.
Take care. All right. That was Congressman Stutzman. Very cool. He, man, he's been all over. He's been all over the Middle East. And, you know, when we're doing these, the preps for interviews and we're trying to figure out who the guest for the morning show is going to be, they came and they said he's working on the Abraham Accords, which I think is one of the most exciting, tremendous successes of Trump's first term and history. Trump set himself up with this insane task of bringing peace to the Middle East, which is considered to be a meme. And Trump was like, I'm going to do it. And he's trying so hard. And bless him for it. I hope he pulls it off, man. I really do. If, you know, I'm thinking about it as Stutzman's talking about Ukraine, pushing back on Russia and all those things. And I'm like, I don't like any of this. I don't like the U.S. involvement in Ukraine. You guys know it. I don't like the U.S. involvement in Syria. Y'all know it. But Trump didn't start those things. They were started before him and technically in between. Trump's working as hard as he can to solve this. And I'm loving it. I'm not a fan of how Syria fell apart. U.S. propaganda efforts, Qatar-Turkey pipeline and all that. But what matters right now is, are we going to get peace? And if they've got a new government and that new government wants normalization, commerce, railroads and all that stuff, man, we really have an opportunity for this generation to bring about something awesome. And think about how they insulted and demean and lie about Trump every single day. Remarkably, Donald Trump does something that I don't like with this strike on Iran. But afterwards, he stabilizes a ceasefire, at least so far. And the remarkable thing is, if Trump is able to pull that off, denuclearizing Iran, at least for a few years, without creating a war, even with my concerns and criticism, it is the best foreign policy ever performed in my lifetime. No new exacerbated conflict in the Middle East. So I'm feeling pretty good. My friends, we're going to send you on your way to hang out with Russell Brand, who is going to talk about Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson, of course, is awesome. Smash the like button. Share the show with everyone you know. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. We're back tonight at 8 p.m. for Timcast IRL. It's going to be fun. It's going to be funny, as it always is. We need to see you there. So please come, please hang out, please share the news. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all tonight.